fundamentalist Christian Bryan Fischer is going to go after Islam here, and he's going to make a point that's so bad and so wrong and so offensive that even myself, as a staunch atheist and anti-theist, even I'm going to say you've gone too far.
Islam is like the Ebola virus. It's deadly. It's lethal. And all you can do with a virus like that, there's no cure for it. It can only be contained. It has to be stopped. And the way you do it is through quarantine. You got to quarantine it. You got to contain it. And I'm suggesting that's really all we can do with this pure, unvarnished Islam. Is all we can do is contain it, like we do the Ebola virus. You know, there are a lot of countries now that will not accept any immigrants from the African countries where the Ebola virus has broken out. If you're from that country, they will not let you migrate, even travel to your country. And that makes a certain amount of sense because there's no cure for this thing. And they don't know which of the citizens of that African country have the Ebola virus and which don't. And so they say, look, we just have to be careful. We have to protect our own people. We got to protect the health of our own people. We cannot let anybody from your country into our country because we cannot take the chance that one of you may be a carrier of the virus. We know that most of you are perfectly healthy. Most of you are perfectly fine. We're sorry in your case that you can't come to our country. It's not your fault. We're not blaming you. It's the people that are carriers that we have to worry about, and we can't tell who has it and who doesn't. Therefore, we got to keep you all out of our country. And I'm suggesting we got to do the same thing with Islam.
See, this is why on the issue of Islamophobia, the term Islamophobia and the concept of it, I'm not with my atheist community friends, and I'm with those guys on a lot, right? Probably most stuff, right? But I'm with the progressive community on the issue of Islamophobia because it's a real thing, and you just witnessed it right there. Islamophobia is what you just saw right there. It's what you see with Bob Beckel, for example. Remember Bob Beckel, the Fox News liberal, who said after the Boston bombing, ban all Muslim students from coming into the country. Ban all Muslim students. So because one Muslim did something fucked up with the Boston bombing, or two, the brothers, right? They're all guilty. Get them all out of here. Now, when there's a shooting and it's a young, depressed white guy, do we say kick all young, depressed white guys out of the country when there's a mass shooting? And by the way, there's 32,000 gun deaths in America every single year. That includes everything, though. Suicide, homicide, accidents, et cetera, et cetera. But is that what we do? Kick all young, depressed white guys out of the country. When there's a sovereign citizen's terrorist attack, which happens more often than Muslim terrorism in the United States of America, 56% of terrorist attacks in America from 1990 until today, according to the Department of Homeland Security, they are right-wing/Christian terrorist attacks, okay? So when there's a KKK incident or a neo-Nazi incident or a sovereign citizen's incident or a patriot militia incident or a Confederate incident, do we say, well, now we're going to have to ban all white people because of these white people? Ban all conservatives because the violence is coming from the conservatives with the Don't Tread on Me flags. Recently, somebody killed a police officer, laid the Don't Tread on Me flag over them. Is that what you say? No. See, that's what the phobia comes from. The idea that if one person does something and they're Muslim, all Muslims are guilty. And you don't do the same thing with Christians. You don't do the same thing with conservatives. You don't do the same thing with any other culture or any other race or anything, right? It's just, if it's somebody I already like that I'm not prejudiced against, you get the benefit of the doubt in the sense that you're a crazy individual, right? Not even necessarily a criminal, you're a crazy individual. But if it's a group I don't like, blame all of them for the actions of one. That's the idea of Islamophobia, and he's doing it to a T right here. He said, quote, Islam is like the Ebola virus. Really? It's like the Ebola virus. 50% minimum to 90% of people who get Ebola die. Do 90% of Muslims die because they're Muslim? So 90% of them are doing suicide bombings? Is that what's happening? But you're just a child if you believe that. For fuck's sake, Brian, look, nobody disagrees with and dislikes religion more than me. I'm against religion. I would like to convince way more people to be non-religious. I always say I think there's a bottom-out number that we're going to reach eventually with the level of religiosity in the world. Not in my lifetime, but down the road. I think we're going to bottom out at anywhere from maybe 5% to 15% or so, maybe 20% of the world population will be religious. Everybody else will be, agnostic, atheist, or secular. And we can already see that happening in the Scandinavian region of the world, in some parts of Europe, and I think that's going to happen the world over soon. I can't wait for that day. I love that day. I want to convince pretty much everybody to be non-religious. But right now, there's over 1 billion Muslims in the world, and for you to say all of you are like the Ebola virus, it's like you have Ebola, but that's just stupid. Because even if we're as harsh as we can be according to the numbers, we just covered this story yesterday. According to Pew and Gallup, okay, doing their poll of Muslim attitudes, anywhere from 9% to 12% of the Muslim population, they're sympathetic to Al-Qaeda and to jihadists, okay? And that's not even to say they'll personally blow themselves up. It's just I'm sympathetic to what they're doing, okay? So let's be as harsh as possible, 12%. So if 12% of the Muslim population believes that, and there's over 1 billion Muslims, okay, that means that hundreds of millions of Muslims are totally normal, totally good people. And also, we haven't even brought up the fact that we're talking about the United States of America. That's what he's talking about in this conversation. What you have to understand is when there are Muslims in America, not only are they just as Americanized as all other Americans, polls show they're even more Americanized than other Americans. Like the study we covered the other day, the poll we covered the other day, Raw Story spoke about it, how 78% of Muslim Americans denounce violence against citizens in all cases, whereas it's only 39% of Protestants and 38% of Catholics and only 56% of atheists, my people. So the people who are most against violence in the United States of America is American Muslims. So this idea that we have to look out only for them, they're the problem, they are the Ebola virus, they are the cancer, they are the, well, we're going to have to punish all of you because some of you are assholes. It is absurd. And finally, I'll say this. If there's anybody on the American political spectrum that agrees with people who believe in Sharia a lot, it's Bryan Fischer. He doesn't even realize it. That's the thing that's amazing about Bryan Fischer. He doesn't even realize he believes in Christian Sharia. Bryan Fischer and fundamentalist Muslims agree on abortion. They agree on gay rights. They agree on women's rights. They agree on education, that you go by your holy book and you put that in the classroom and you teach kids discipline and a rigid way of living and go by the dogmatic book and order and structure. So you agree with these people, but you're arguing against them. It just shows you Bryan Fischer's ignorance is on a whole nother level.